creatures have walked this world of ours. Some have left it forever. Why did the great dinosaurs vanish? Was it a mass extinction? Were they wiped out by an asteroid? Or was it something else? Can science tell us what happened to them? Will we find our answers in the Bible? In this series, we'll look to both science and the Bible to help bring dinosaurs back to life, to find some answers to the many questions they have left us. Uncovering the truth about dinosaurs. Dinosaurs and the Flood. A French naturalist, Georges Cuvier, first came up with the idea of extinction way back in 1796. The idea was controversial at the time, but Cuvier theorized that a species could be driven extinct by catastrophic flooding. Now, he didn't say that the flood was the one from Genesis, but could it have been? Could the dinosaurs' downfall have begun with God's judgment of a wicked world? I'm Marcus Lloyd, and that's what we're going to try to find out. Imagine how the world looked when dinosaurs were around. It would have been even wetter and warmer then. And this would have been a tropical forest. You know, sometimes it's hard to even believe that dinosaurs existed. But they did, and they're gone now. A whole kind of animal vanished. What really happened to them? After the fall, when Adam and Eve sinned in the garden, death was introduced into the world. Some dinosaurs became carnivores, while others remained plant eaters, herbivores. And over the next 1,600 years or so, the world became increasingly evil, as the Bible tells us. So the Lord said, I will destroy man, whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast, creeping thing and birds of the air, for I am sorry that I have made them. God brought on a flood and spared only Noah and his family, and of course, of every living thing of all flesh, two of every sort. Except for those on the ark, countless dinosaurs and other animals were wiped out. Mainstream science says that mass extinction was brought on by an asteroid hitting the earth. Well, who's right? Dinosaurs are found in layers of rock creation scientists call systems. You've probably heard of the Triassic, Jurassic, and Cretaceous. These are identified by the type of fossils found in them. Dinosaurs are almost exclusively found in these three systems.
The different rock layers that dinosaurs are found in are assigned ages by the secular world that go back millions of years. They talk about the Cretaceous period, the Jurassic period, the Triassic period. As creationists, we like to use the word systems because we don't believe there are actually periods of time. These are all part of the flood record.
So each individual layer is huge, catastrophic, fast deposited, and they're all evidence of having been buried in water.
And with something like the Triceratops behind me, it's got an interesting story to tell because the skull was found all by itself. It's found in the Lance Formation in Wyoming. It was isolated. There were no other Triceratops parts of the body nearby, so that tells us a little bit about its history. This is not the actual place where the Triceratops died. The Triceratops died somewhere else, and the head was separated from the body, moved and transported by sediments, water, and sand and mud until it came to rest. But it didn't come to rest sitting upright. Instead, it was almost upside down. It was tripoded on its horns sticking down in the frill in the back. Now, why would it be upside down? If we think of this as a skull that is being transported, the heaviest parts of the skull are the horns coming over the eye and the frill over the back of the head. And so as the water and sand mixture moves this skull, it rotates around upside down and plants itself down when the speed of the flow finally slows enough that the sediment can settle with the skull inside of it. So we've got a couple pieces of the story with a disembodied head and an upside down skull in a set of sediments far from where it started.
There's a consistent pattern of the water moving across continents, 1,000 feet or more above present sea level, a moving ocean over the continents, draping the continents with sediment from one shore to the other. Whoa, what do we got here? It seems to describe what the Bible is talking about when it talks about a global deluge in the days of Noah.
Secular scientists think that dinosaurs were eventually wiped out by 5 major extinction events, the last and most devastating event happening about 65 million years ago. Let's examine this theory.
So we've all heard the asteroid theory of dinosaur extinction. And according to this story, an asteroid or some kind of impact smashed into the Earth and created tsunamis and disrupted the crust in such a way that the dinosaurs went extinct. That's a story, and it has problems.
It's a story told by those who don't want to accept the biblical account. They say when the asteroid collided with Earth, it spread a layer of iridium over the planet. While creation scientists acknowledge the iridium, they question whether the asteroid was the source of it. Volcanic eruptions also distribute this element.
We need to pan back and see this is bigger than an asteroid. Something much bigger than an asteroid was necessary to kill all the life on the land, which is what the biblical flood did.
According to evolutionary thinking, this great catastrophic asteroid striking the Earth as being very selective, causing extinction of only the dinosaurs. And yes, of course, there were other animals that were killed, but it only seemed to kill the dinosaurs, not the extinction of the fish, not the extinction of the birds or any other groups of animals. Yes, there was a lot of death attributed to that, but only found within the Dinosauria. What is also significant is that evolutionists agree to a worldwide extinction event. We attribute it to the flood of Genesis chapter 6 through 9.
Creation scientists say that the fossil record matches what you would expect to see from a worldwide flood. The low-lying places went under first, and the mountains flooded last.
So when you look at a sedimentary layer, some insist that the layer itself, the thickness of that layer, is a time indicator. But when they say that, they're asserting that this layer was deposited over lots of time. However, if you have enough water moving fast enough, the layer can be deposited in minutes. So it's not a time indicator. You just have to have a lot of water. The problem is, so many of us are not willing to think or conceive of that much water. But the Bible says the earth was covered with water. So if you have that much water sloshing around across the whole earth, you would have the conditions set up perfectly to make thick rock layers very fast.
Even the secular geologists will acknowledge nearly all of those rocks are water deposited, and they've got within them remains of billions of dead animals. And of course, that sounds very much like a flood, and they would argue that there's been flooding in Earth history, but they would claim that it never covered the entire surface of the Earth. So they're willing to allow for large floods, if you will, what they would call marine transgressions, where the water encroached onto the land, but they claim this happened over many millions of years, and it was never a global flood that covered the Earth's entire surface.
In the biblical account, the flood occurred in the 600th year of Noah's life, on the 17th day of the second month. The windows of heaven opened up and the rains fell for 40 days and 40 nights. Giant tears opened in the seafloor and the floodwaters rose and fell. But the flood didn't cover the land all at once. It gave time for creatures to get to higher ground. But gradually, the waters prevailed. According to Genesis, it covered all the hills and drowned all but the 8 humans and many animals on the ark. Secular paleontologists tell us that we find different types of dinosaurs in different layers because the extinction events are separated by millions of years. Creation scientists attribute it to the various stages of the flood.
The flood was probably a lot bigger than we can imagine as humans. We tend to think the flood was just a local flood a lot of times. A lot of people think the flood really didn't do that much. It was tranquil, but the flood was probably more devastating than anything else on Earth. It entirely destroyed the Earth. It was God's judgment on the Earth.
Many forms of life, both human and animals, perished as the entire planet was covered with water, even covering what were then the highest hills and mountains.
Geologically, we have plates moving during the flood rapidly, meters per second. We've got the continents kind of colliding with each other, making mountain ranges. All the stuff was going on in the 1 year of the flood. The flood wasn't just rain. It didn't just rain for 40 days. The flood went on for over a year before the animals got out of the ark. So all this upheaval and all this movement and all these mountains and the Himalayas, all this stuff formed in the flood. And we see evidence of that. We see flood sediments pushed way up into these mountains. Tremendous upheaval was going on in the earth. So there were probably dinosaurs that were alive pretty close for the first 100 to 120 days of the flood, maybe even longer. But by day 150, the Bible tells us everything was completely wiped out.
Everything that lived on land and breathed air died if it was not aboard the ark. Obviously, the second main thing that happened during the Genesis flood was that there were survivors, those who were aboard the ark, and of course, sea creatures that live in the ocean anyway. They didn't need to be on the ark. 8 humans survived, and representatives of all the creative kinds, whether that represents 16,000 animals or something less than that.
One thing that the secular world and the creation scientists agree on is there were floods of some sort in the geologic record. And one of the things that we agree on are these mega sequences where the water apparently during the flood came in big, huge packages of water and then probably recede a little bit.
Now, if you have a rock unit, say near the bottom of the Grand Canyon, and then you have another rock unit near the top, obviously the one near the bottom was formed first. And so we're not going to dispute that, but that's not the same thing as saying it was formed millions of years before this other rock unit. And there are actually clues, strong clues within the rocks themselves that these rock units were formed very rapidly and catastrophically, not slowly and gradually over millions of years as the evolutionists claim.
And these clues are the fossils. Evolutionists say it takes long periods of time to make one. But is that really true? How are fossils made? You have to remember, not everything that dies becomes a fossil. In fact, fossilization is rare. Most dead plants and animals are usually eaten by scavengers or destroyed by bacteria. The things that are buried quickly in sand and mud, like in a flood or a landslide, have a better chance of becoming fossils. And animal soft tissues, that's skin and internal organs, usually rot away, even when buried, leaving only bones. As the material around a fossilized bone is cleared away by erosion, the fossil becomes exposed.
We see a pattern with dinosaur fossils. Why do they occur in some areas but not in others? And especially with the dinosaur footprints. They're along this dinosaur trackway that goes from North Texas and it swoops up on the eastern side of the Rocky Mountains all the way to Canada. The flood may help answer that, because if the floodwaters are moving in, they're wiping out the last creatures to survive. The last creatures to survive are probably the hardiest, the ones that can be hit with water, can wade in that water. At the highest elevations during the flood year, maybe these dinosaurs were wading in water, and then during the tides, for example, the water would recede a little bit, and then the dinosaurs would have a place to step foot. And they were tracking their way in the highest elevations. So during the flood, we would have had water sloshing back and forth, and we would have had the conditions that set up for preservation of trackways and preservation of trackways in just the highest areas.
But the earliest ones, the Triassic dinosaurs, are found on the fringes of what's called the Dinosaur Peninsula. Those dinosaurs are mostly all small. And then as the water went up higher, the next group of dinosaurs, the Jurassic system dinosaurs, were buried, and those include a lot of the sauropods. The sauropods, those big long necks, they were very big, but they couldn't really run, they couldn't trot away. And then later, as we go further to the north, as that peninsula is being flooded systematically kind of from south to north, we get up into Montana and Alberta and Canada, we see the huge herds of dinosaurs.
A lot of times, dinosaur fossils occur in what we call bone beds. And so these bone beds are packed with dinosaur fossils. And some of them are vast. There's one that was discovered recently in Alberta with just hundreds of Centrosaurus dinosaurs in a 1 by 1 square mile area. How did they get there? floodwaters from a massive, catastrophic flooding event could bring in the mud that would bury this herd of centrosaurs.
This is generally described as a river deposit. If it were truly a river deposit, you wouldn't be able to trace these beds for long distances. But we've been able to trace some of these beds over quite an extensive area. So this is an indication that these sediments are being deposited under deeper water. And that's a major change in our view of how the lance got deposited.
So the vast scale of carnage that we see in the rock layers indicates to us that there was a vast scale of power involved in their death. In addition, we see sea creatures buried with dinosaurs. We see clams, we see shark teeth, we see fish fossils, garfish scales. Well, what would we expect to see in the fossils if there was some kind of catastrophe that mixed sea with land, that brought ocean water up onto land or something like that? We might expect to see some ocean creatures, some estuary creatures mixed with swamp creatures, lowland areas. And that's exactly what we find in these dinosaur rock layers.
If you've ever been in the ocean, you know how you rise and fall with the waves. 1 second, your feet touch the bottom, and then a wave pulls you up. As you wade further out, you walk on your tiptoes until it becomes too deep, and then you have no choice but to swim. That's exactly what some dinosaur tracks show.
And in many cases, the water levels were lapping up onto there, leaving fresh sediment, but not enough to wipe out the dinosaurs or kill the dinosaurs or bury the dinosaurs, just enough so they could leave a lot of footprints.
And so they're in shallow water, then the water gets deeper and deeper, and as the water rises, they're making claw marks, and then as the water lowers, they make deeper impressions, footprints. That's weird. How do you get that much water up on land, and then how do you get the water to flow and to rise and lower, and then how do you get these deposits to come in and lay down sand, lay down sediment, and in such a way that it's not too fast to tear up where they had just stepped, but it's fast enough to bring in sediment and deposit it right on their footprints to preserve them.
A couple other observations about the dinosaurs fit this global flood scenario. One is that when we first encounter the dinosaurs, let's say we're going through the layers of rock in the earth and looking for fossils. We don't find dinosaurs at the very oldest rocks. There's a certain point at which we find the first evidence of dinosaurs. Interestingly enough, when we find them, we find footprints. We don't find the bones, we don't find the bodies, we find footprints. Forensic pathology comes in. Why do we have footprints, not bodies? The flood makes a very nice explanation.
After the flood, it took months for the water to recede enough for Noah and his passengers to set down on dry land and begin fulfilling God's command to replenish the earth. Humans are still around, but dinosaurs didn't make it. What went wrong?
After the flood, when the dinosaurs embarked from Noah's Ark, and there was probably at least 60 or so pairs of dinosaurs that were brought on the Ark, these dinosaurs went off and had to reestablish their eggs and their nesting sites and reproduce like God instructed all the animals and the humans to do. But it appears dinosaurs did go extinct in the thousands of years after the flood.
So what happened to the dinosaurs that survived the flood and left the ark? Well, they likely had clashes with humans, went through climate changes as extreme as the Ice Age, and had their habitats greatly reduced after the flood.
The post-flood world also started to go through a period of stabilization and kind of getting us to the point where we are today, where there's no longer an ice age. The ice had melted back across the northern continents in North America and in Asia. And so things started to stabilize after the flood and to kind of get into this routine that we have today. Deserts formed in the Sahara. All these different environments started to work themselves out. Unfortunately, the dinosaurs don't appear to be one of those types of animals that were able to thrive after the flood.
So humans probably contributed to that, probably a great deal, but it was probably a gradual process. There's good reason to think that dinosaurs were alive for many years, many centuries after the flood, and there's even evidence that some of them may have survived even into the Middle Ages and beyond.
Each passing year brings exciting new finds about these fascinating creatures. But with each new discovery comes new questions. And the answers seem to come from the same place, the Bible. Recently, paleontologists have found blood cells, soft tissues, and remnants of dinosaur proteins. Now, these things should not have survived millions of years encased in rock. But that's another story for next time. The world was once filled with mysterious creatures. But how long ago? Did the great dinosaurs live and die tens of millions of years before man? Will we find our answers in science? What can the Bible tell us? In this series, we'll look to both science and the Bible to help bring dinosaurs back to life and to find answers to the questions they have left us. Uncovering the truth about dinosaurs. The hard truth. I'm Marcus Lloyd, and in this series, we're trying to shine some light on the controversy of whether dinosaurs